Hello, and welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 51. We're going to talk about Wolfman from 1979. I rented this from Scarecrow Video. I had not seen this before. As always, we're going to begin by discussing the prominent crew and cast. This film was directed and written by Worth Keeter. The effects makeup was by Sandy Barber and Worth Keeter. This was Worth Keeter's first film as a director. He'd worked a lot of other filmmaking jobs before getting into directing, and you can tell by the fact that he is credited for the effects makeup on this very movie. The thing that immediately jumped out at me, glancing over his filmography, is how many Power Ranger projects he has worked on. We can add Sandy Barber to the list of werewolf effects makeup artists who have only one credit on their IMDb page. I'm starting to wonder if there is a bigger story behind this trend. I'll keep an eye on it. The cast includes Earl Owensby as Colin Glasgow, Christina Reynolds as Lynn Harris Randolph, Ed Grady as Reverend Leonard, billed as Edward Grady, Julian Morton as Edwin Glasgow, Richard Dedmon as Clement Glasgow, Maggie Lautner as Elizabeth Glasgow, Helena Tyron as Grandmother Glasgow, Sid Rancer as Dr. George Tate, Al Mayers as Ewan Rowe, the attorney, and Brownlee Davis as the sheriff. Earl Owensby was a true multi-hyphenate, an actor, producer, and director. Earl Owensby's success as a filmmaker can be attributed to determination and entrepreneurial spirit. He started his career as a tool salesman in Shelby and went on to establish multiple successful businesses before venturing into the film industry. He saw himself as a businessman focused on building a successful media company. Critics sometimes described him as having a giant ego due to his tendency to cast himself in lead roles. Owensby's films often featured violence and relied on local North Carolina talent for cast and crew. He distributed his films in 42 countries and even testified in a congressional subcommittee about the challenges faced by independent filmmakers in the film rating system. This movie was Ed Grady's first film role. Like a lot of film production studios, EO Studios worked with the same actors over and over. Brownlee Davis did 8 films for EO Studios. Helene Tyron, Sid Rancer both did 6 films each. Christina Reynolds did 3 pictures. Julian Morian, Richard Dedmon, and Maggie Lautner did 2 each. This was Al Mayer's only film role. I love doing this project. I love learning about obscure corners of film history, and this film definitely opened up an obscure corner for me to explore, but it's not a very entertaining film in and of itself. Do not force yourself to watch this film. It's plodding and slow and telegraphs its surprises. The acting is uneven. It shares some low-budget issues with The Rats Are Coming, The Werewolves Are Already Here, though it lacks that film's camp and energy, and this film does have much better action scenes. Earl Owensby was nicknamed the Redneck Roger Corman and the Dixie DeMille. He was friends with Elvis Presley. So now, let's review the synopsis. Dark and stormy night at the Glasgow Manor estate. A single window is lit. Reverend Leonard stabs Edwin Glasgow in a bed while the man's nephew and niece watch on. Edwin's son, Colin Glasgow, is picked up at the train station by the family attorney. Everyone lies to Colin constantly. They need him to stay for mysterious reasons. Leonard and the cousins hold some kind of dark ceremony, calling upon the devil with all his names, to pass the curse of the Glasgow family on to Colin. By the way, something fishy is going on with Colin's grandmother. Mark my words. Leonard turns out to be just as comfortable conducting a Christian funeral as he was with a satanic ceremony. Colin visits Lynn, an old flame, at a clock store and asks her out on a date. The locals butt in for reasons I was not clear on. Colin busts a beer bottle over the guy's head, and the date ends early. Lynn tells Colin about the unsolved murders and the strange wolf locals have reported. Is it better to tell us about that than show us? The date ends with a chaste kiss. Colin has a weird out-of-body dream sequence. He was also sleeping fully dressed, so he finds himself at Edwin's grave when a hand shoots out of the ground and grabs him. The attorney informs Colin his father's will requires him to stay home for 30 days. When Colin asks to review the will, the attorney gets nervous and shifty. Colin discovers the will and signature are forged. Colin visits Dr. Tate, the family doctor, who agrees that things are suspicious. Dr. Tate says Grandma Glasgow is fine. Colin picks a lock to visit his grandmother. Grandma tells Colin the truth. The Glasgow family is under a curse. Colin's parents tried to spare him. The family is cursed with lycanthropy. She tells him that Reverend Leonard is the mastermind. She tells him to check his father's index finger for proof. That night, Colin has another blurry, out of focus, out of body dream. By the way, Colin is one hairy dude. Driven by his grandmother's revelations and his own dreams, he exhumes his father's corpse. Sure enough, the finger is deformed. A wolf then attacks Colin. Colin's doctor friend tells him that he's going crazy and prescribes sedatives so Colin can sleep. Lynn calls on Colin. Colin tells her that he's leaving town and she should stay far away from him. He freaks her out a bit. He starts packing his bags, but it's too late. The moon is full, and Colin becomes a werewolf. He kills a poor farming couple. The sheriff investigates. The medical examiner says that it's an animal, but it can't be a wolf since there aren't wolves in that country. Colin wakes up covered in blood splatter. He burns his clothes and then goes to tell Lynn and the doctor what's going on. They don't believe him. Probably shouldn't have burned the evidence then, Colin. The doctor insists this is all superstitious nonsense. They plan to lock Colin in the basement to prove it. Sheriff rounds up a posse with orders to shoot to kill. Colin gets chained up. The full moon comes out. Colin becomes a werewolf again. The doctor and Lynn flee. Smart. The chains hold for maybe 3 seconds. Colin breaks into his family's house, killing the family servant and both cousins. Great plan, turning your cousin into a werewolf, idiots. Colin kills several members of the hunting posse. The others drive him off with gunfire, although Colin seems uninjured, just scared. The posse spreads out. The plan is proven to be stupid when Colin starts picking off posse members in their smaller, less defensive groups. The sun comes up and Colin turns back into a human. Dr. Tate and Lynn find him. He tells them to find Reverend Leonard, and since he's the one behind all this, the posse finds Colin in the woods and arrests him. The sheriff finds the carnage at Glasgow Manor. Colin tries to explain, but no one is buying what he's saying. The sheriff is trying to pin 8 murders and Grandma Glasgow's imprisonment on Colin. Dr. Tate and Lynn confront Reverend Leonard. Leonard straight up stabs Dr. Tate. Lynn flees and hides. She cracks Leonard in the face with a lantern and runs. Leonard pursues her through the graveyard before attacking her in the forest. When Colin hears Leonard and Lynn are headed towards Glasgow Manor, he blows right past the sheriff, deputy, and coroner. They give chase. Colin arrives just in time to save Lynn. Colin takes a few slices from a silver dagger, but the full moon rises before Leonard can finish Colin. Colin turns into the werewolf and jumps out of the attic window with Leonard in his arms. Leonard dies from impact. Colin dies from landing on the knife. This is the last werewolf film to come out in the 1970s. You and I both know what's coming soon. So it makes it even harder to enjoy these basic static dissolves. It's not fair to this film to judge it against what comes next. I know that. It's just hard not to. If this is all they can deliver, I'd much rather that they skip the transformation scenes and use the time and budget elsewhere to improve the film. All that said, I still had issues with the makeup job. In his werewolf form, Colin runs around in a long-sleeve shirt buttoned up to the very top. He looks nerdy. I strongly suspect the decision was made to minimize the required makeup work. Nothing below the neck or above the wrists had to be touched. It just ends up looking like a werewolf on the way to Sunday school. Another problem this film has is it doesn't add anything new to the werewolf lore or say anything interesting with the existing lore. It's a retread. It feels like a cheaper made knockoff of a much better film that preceded it. What I did find interesting about this film is the history of Earl Owensby and the creation and existence of Owensby Film Studios. So let's discuss that. Earl Owensby Studios, also known as EO Studios, is an American film and television production company founded by Earl Owensby in 1974. The studio developed, produced, and distributed low-budget action films. The films mainly saw play in outdoor drive-ins and grindhouse theaters in the American South. Although Owensby's films may not have had much widespread appeal in the United States, they did gain a lot of popularity among international audiences. The first of Owensby's films is Frank Challenge, Manhunter, released in 1974. The film starred Owensby as Frank Challenge, a U.S. Senate candidate seeking revenge for the murder of his family. The success of Frank Challenge led to the establishment of EO Studios in Shelby, North Carolina. Another EO Studios film, Dark Sunday, released in 1976, gained notoriety when the Motion Picture Association of America's ratings board initially refused to approve the film. It was eventually released with an R rating. Owensby took pride in the fact that none of his films lost money, a rare achievement in the film industry. He shot films on a tight and low budget and distributed them at a profit. He wasn't interested in being an artiste. He was a shrewd businessman who chose film. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing Children of the Full Moon from 1980. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode.